So let's do some mansplaining here. 6 fallacies about gender. Number 1. Do all women need a bad boy? It's a subject that's quite beguiling to men, especially young men. And we're not going to get into too much detail about the major nuances of it, but let's kind of look at the percentages as I see them breaking down. This is an anecdotal, generalized little graph here. So, yeah, a small percentage of women have no taste throughout their life for bad boys. About half women have a varying mild taste throughout their life, and it causes occasional problems in their romances. And a percentage of about 40% of women under 35 or 40, especially hot women, have a dysfunctional need that causes major problems for both the men in their lives and for themselves. Common thing that happens when a man and a woman break up is that it's assumed that the man cheated. Well, cheating sucks for everybody. Very painful experience. But the differences really are not substantial. I wouldn't say they're negligible. 10% if it is that high. That's not negligible, but it's also not, in my opinion, substantial. If you are concerned about being cheated on as a woman, best thing to do is to avoid famous or powerful men, because they do cheat substantially more than all of women and most men. Another fallacy I've seen bandied about by men of all ages and all socioeconomic classes is that attractive women are meaner than less attractive women. Fact is, it's pretty similar overall. If you take a look at these stats that I have here, again, anecdotally, generally put together, really, they kind of even out overall, possibly a little meaner after breakup. They can seem initially bitchy when you try to approach them, and they can be more obviously high maintenance. These things do not equate to being mean, necessarily, or generally. Women are typically mean when they're disappointed, and an attractive woman will be more likely to jettison you when she finds you disappointing than a less attractive woman, hence saving you from the wrath of her disappointment. This is something that I've seen stated implicitly and explicitly. So we have 3 hot women, 3 hot men. And I suppose women's taste in men is somewhat less predictable. And it arguably is more complex and less superficial. But that's kind of nullified by women's taste for bad boys. My advice is just to chill out and realize that neither gender's taste is sophisticated. This one's been all the rage for the last few years amongst social justice warriors. Yes, the patriarchy is not a good thing. But how much does it really contribute to the average man's sexism towards women? Well, let's take a look at the breakdown of how it impacts socially conservative men. It is a large factor with how socially conservative men view women. But with the average man, it's really not that big of a factor with how they perceive women in this day and age. And with women who are also sexist, the breakdown goes something like this. And I am implying that women do not think for themselves as much about gender issues as men do. And a little side note here, the worst part of the patriarchy has always been religion. Here we enter an area that's a fair amount more controversial. Could be quite triggering. I'm not minimizing the experiences of women in domestic violence situations at all here. Just noting some other statistics and ways to look at the concept of abuse. So let's look at some stats here. I'll let you take a look at that, see what you think. The surprising ones might be that there's a lot of reciprocal violence between men and women, and that women commit a lot of physical abuse of their male partner that is not reciprocal. The stat that may make your eyes roll rather than bug out is that women commit a disproportionate amount of emotional abuse of their male partners. Put a seasoned couples counselor on a polygraph, and I suspect you'd find these stats are pretty close to what they think they should be. So let the eye rolling begin as I go over how women emotionally abuse men. Yep, this is the most common type of abuse, albeit emotional abuse. Demeaning, disparaging comments, often about his performance on things. Passive aggression, pretty mild form of abuse, but abuse nonetheless. Usually subtle contempt. And the weird one is irrational or double standards. How is that abusive? Well, we'll get into that in another video, but I assure you it is. Now, if these struck you as not abusive, I think you may be listening to the patriarchy and the matriarchy. I know what you're thinking. So let's pull back up that graph, and I'll show you here. What I'm referring to is when abuse is occurring. Not all relationships are abusive, thank goodness. So feel free to tear me up in the comments. Sources available upon request.